Welcome to Talking Politics. I am Paul Gable. I'm here with Randall Wallace this week, who's sitting in for our normal co-host, John Bond Sr., and we're entertaining Attorney General Alan Wilson from South Carolina, who will be back to tell us about his re-election run for his third term in office. We'll be back in a moment. Welcome back, man. Thank you for coming down here. I know you made the trip from Columbia here this morning already, and so you've got a lot more energy than I have today. I'll tell you that.
Yes, sir.
But you are now, you're just finishing, you're in your last year of your second term in office.
Correct.
And you're going to be running for re-election. And tell us a bit about the office itself and about some of the things that you've enjoyed the most while you were in there.
Well, this is my third time in the Attorney General's office. I was an intern back in the 90s. I was a prosecutor, an assistant attorney general about a dozen or so years ago, prosecuting in the grand jury division. And then, of course, now I'm back in my third stint as the actual attorney general. I speak to a lot of school groups, and I always like to give a little bit of useless trivia, nickel knowledge, so that people can impress your friends when you're at your favorite watering hole with useless South Carolina trivia. But the Attorney General's office is the oldest office in the state of South Carolina. It was actually created in 1698. So 320 years we've had an AG. I believe I'm the 51st Attorney General.
It's something, yeah, right in the early 50s, yeah.
Yeah, and Nicholas Trott was the first Attorney General who received his commission from the King of England at the time. And I think the biggest campaign issue he had to run on was the Barbary pirates off the coast of Charleston. So prosecuting piracy was, I might loop that into my campaign this year, but that's what he dealt with.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, and you know, you talk about that, and the first Attorney General, and of course, the King's Commission back when we were a young colony.
Right.
There's been some other notables in your position, and like I told you before the show, my favorite is James L. Pettigrew.
Pettigrew.
Who I believe was Attorney General from about 1822 to around 1830. Mm-hmm. But Pettigrew's famous for when the day after the secession vote in 1860, Pettigrew said that South Carolina was too small for a republic and too large for an insane asylum.
Insane asylum.
And I'm not sure he hasn't defined us today.
The office has actually grown so much since the 1970s and early 80s. Even since I've been in office, I took office in 2011. It has grown in the scope and scale of what it does. A lot of other agencies have been folded up under it, and so we have gone from about 220 to about 300 employees just in the last 7 years, and that's because we have consolidated government resources, not grown government, but they have passed a lot of reforms that have put additional people. If we were a private law firm, we would be the second largest law firm in the state. So there are about 300 employees. About 90 of those employees are actual attorneys. We are, under the Constitution, I'm the chief prosecutor of the state and the chief legal officer for the state, and I'm also the state securities commissioner. So it's a very broad, very broad office, a lot going on. We handle all of the appeals for all of your local prosecutors and solicitors throughout the state, and we work with law enforcement on the various number of issues that we'll talk about shortly. But it's a fun job, it's a busy job, and it keeps me hopping.
And you've enjoyed, obviously, your 2 terms, or you wouldn't be running for a third. And there's one other former Attorney General maybe we should mention, and maybe that is the ultimate destination for you, we could hope. We had an Attorney General that became John Rutledge. He was the second Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court. So there you go. That's what we have in the future for you.
I don't know that you'll ever see me in a black robe. I have a friend that works with me in the Attorney General's office who is a former judge, and I've told him that a number of times.
Well, you're also, I guess, what did they call you? The protector of citizens' rights or the citizens' welfare in this state. Mm-hmm. And I guess one of the more recent things, one of the notable things in the last 6 months was you took on the U.S. Department of Energy and beat them over this Savannah River. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, that was involving the construction of the MOX facility. And there's been a number of issues with the Department of Energy that come from the Obama administration, have spilled over into the Trump administration. But as most people know, decades ago, they had designated Yucca Mountain, which is a mountain out in Nevada, as the nuclear repository for all nuclear waste in the country. And they spent billions of dollars studying this, doing environmental impact studies, and actually billions of dollars creating what is ostensibly a wine cellar for all of the nuclear waste in the country. About 10 years ago, or just under 10 years ago, a little known senator from Nevada, Harry Reid, actually got the former president to basically, they unilaterally shut down Yucca Mountain after a joint Congress had established it as our nuclear site.
Not in my backyard, so to speak.
Yeah, well, they didn't want it in their backyard, but that was after billions of dollars were spent in the state to develop that as a nuclear repository for all of the country's waste. Well, the federal government had told South Carolina over the decades that, and we paid nearly $3 billion into the nuclear waste fund as a state. When you pay your utility rates, you're paying into this fund. And they said, we're either going to use Savannah River site going to take the waste from the Savannah River site, and we're going to either process it at the MOX facility, or we're going to put it out at Yucca Mountain. Well, they shut down Yucca Mountain a couple of years ago, and the courts ruled in our favor when we sued. The court said to the former president, you can't unilaterally shut down something that Congress has set up. But Congress still zeroed out the budget, so it was a Pyrrhic victory. We won on the law, we lost on the money. So Yucca Mountain's effectively dead. That only left us with the MOX facility, which stands for Mixed Oxide Fabrication Facility. And that's where they take that nuclear sludge, that plutonium, and they repurpose it. And now they're shutting down the MOX facility because they say it's not economically feasible to continue the construction. So now they've collected billions of dollars from us. They also passed a law saying that if we don't remove this waste from your state within a certain period of time, we're going to pay you $100 million a year, every year, until we remove it. Well, right now, we're coming up on $300 million that the federal government owes us because they've shut down the MOX facility. And that is what we're currently litigating, and that's what we're waiting to hear from the court.
And of course, that's one of the things. Now, you've taken on the federal government and a few other things recently, haven't you? Well,
yes, I've actually been in over 50 legal actions against the former administration, the Obama administration. We sued them on a number of things. I was one of the 8 state attorneys general who led on the Obamacare lawsuit, 26 state challenge. I'm now one of 20 AGs leading on the new Obamacare lawsuit.
That's last week too, right?
Yes, that was 2 weeks ago. We joined in that, and I can go into that a little bit deeper in detail if you want to know why we're suing again when we lost 6 years ago. Actually, the posture of the case has changed, and we think that we have a much stronger case now. But I led on Dodd-Frank. We actually won the lawsuit on the what waters of the U.S. as well as a voter ID lawsuit that we had. And then, of course, the president's unlawful immigration order we sued on and won that lawsuit. So there have been dozens of cases in which the federal government has done the wrong thing or tried to over-exercise its authority on the state of South Carolina. And we've been constantly fighting that overreach.
You know, and I referred to Pettigrew, and we'll come back there if we will in a moment. It's time for us to take a break. We've got to let our sponsors talk. We'll be back in a moment.
At Surfside Cafe and Creamery, we pride ourselves on serving you the best there is. Our breakfast and lunch menus feature Boar's Head products. And how about starting your day with one of our signature coffee blends from Charleston Coffee Roasters? Surfside Cafe and Creamery has something for every taste, including the best ice cream on the Grand Strand. You gotta taste it to believe it. Surfside Cafe and Creamery, 1611 Highway 17, Surfside Beach.
My name is Angelo Antonucci, and I'd like to welcome you to my restaurant. I've been in Myrtle Beach now for over 30 years, and we are the home of the greatest steaks in the universe. Here at Angelo's, we have a fantastic Italian buffet with your favorite pastas served with meatballs and sausage and delicious gourmet pizzas. But where we really shine is our entrees like our Scampi Traditional, Alfredo or Lemon Romano served over linguine, our French pork chops with garlic mashed potatoes, and our twin fillets featuring our signature Marsala sauce. It's a great place to enjoy with family and friends, so stop by and see us at our new location at the corner of 24th Avenue South and South Kings Highway. Don't just take my word for it. Come in and try Angelo's, home of the greatest steaks in the universe.
Here at Angelo's.
at New China Buffet in Surfside Beach, probably, I think, the best Chinese buffet on the Grand Strand. And we're entertaining Attorney General Alan Wilson today, and you were talking about federal overreach. And really, isn't that the history of South Carolina and the federal government? States' rights and versus federal power and what have you?
I've always used the analogy of the Blob. If you ever remember that movie?
I remember that movie.
Remember,
unfortunately, I saw that movie as a young kid when it first came out.
Well, it's a 1950s movie starring Steve McQueen.
Right.
And the premise of the movie is this meteor lands from outer space, and this little tiny blob the size of this coffee mug comes out, and throughout the next hour and a half, it rolls along, eating everybody. And as it eats people, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and by the end of the movie, Steve McQueen and the remaining townsfolk find themselves caught inside a diner, and it's the size of a house. And of course, they learn that if you can freeze the blob, you can't kill it, but if you can freeze it, you can stop it. And they're able to freeze it with fire extinguishers, coolants, and they dump it in the Arctic Ocean. But the point of the analogy is that the blob is an organism that rolls along, consuming, eating, devouring everything in its wake. It has no end state, it has no agenda but to consume. Federal government's a lot like the blob.
Oh, yeah.
It just rolls along, consuming, eating, devouring, and it will never be big enough to be sated or to be full. It's just going to keep eating until it's bigger than a house, bigger than a mountain. And we have to use the tools under the Constitution to try to freeze and constrain it. The federal government, you know, and listen, I've considered dropping Congress in the Arctic Ocean. But the
absolutely.
Constitution won't allow us to do that, but it's to constrain the growth of government. Government cannot physically be all things to all people. And of course, a government big enough to give you everything you want is big enough to take everything you've got. But that is why we bring these suits. Not because we're against helping people, not because we don't think there's a role for the federal government or state or local government in serving people. But sometimes that government tries to be all things to all people, and it ends up destroying liberty.
And you know, Obamacare has been an example. I think a lot of folks think of that. And the Supreme Court had done something here recently that changed. You were talking about it earlier. You alluded to it earlier about making your case a little better or stronger.
So when we brought the first Obamacare lawsuit back in 2012, a majority of the justices on the U.S. Supreme Court said that under the law, that Congress cannot pass a law that compels you, mandates that you get off your couch and go enter into a market, meaning you go buy insurance. The government cannot force you to go buy something for this express purpose of then regulating you. But Chief Justice Roberts split off from the majority and said, however, Congress can tax you into activity, meaning they can tax us if we don't get off our couch and go buy insurance. And that is why Obamacare initially survived the Supreme Court. Something happened last December. Under the tax cut bill that was passed in December of 2017, they took out the tax under Obamacare. And so now there is no tax in Obamacare, and Chief Justice Roberts is left with his original argument that if there is no tax to tax us into activity under the insurance markets, the only thing that's left is a mandate that we go buy something. You know, the government cannot force you to go buy health insurance any more than they can force people watching this program to go join a gym and get a gym membership and get in shape. That's basically the principle of what they're doing. And so that's what's left, and that's what this lawsuit basically is going to argue. And we're going to take it all the way to the Supreme Court again if we have to.
You get a feel for what Roberts will do?
I only know what he did in 2012, and he said that he agreed with the other justices that he doesn't agree with the mandate, but he does agree that Congress can pass a tax. That tax is no longer good, and what's left is the mandate. I don't know how he would argue out of that. We'll see. We'll find out.
However, he is in the black robe, and he is an attorney, and you know, you guys have both sides of the opinion.
Yeah, that's right. He gets the final say.
But no, I think you're probably right. He does not strike me as the kind of guy that will go against something he's decided. Of course, none of the nine do, frankly.
Yeah.
And we have certainly had Supreme Court decisions overturned,
That's right.
but not by the same people who decided them in the first place.
That's right. And remember, I tell people all the time, a majority, 5 members of the Supreme Court can make something constitutional simply by all agreeing. I still think Obamacare is unconstitutional in the way that it was passed and the way that it's being implemented. They said it's not. You know, obviously we're stuck with that decision. But the way they came to that decision, they gave us a roadmap on how it would be unconstitutional, and that is what Congress has made it.
And maybe that was the intent on that decision.
It very well could have been.
You know, I mean, you look at our country, and you had Dred Scott You had the one in the 1890s. I'm not going to remember the name now.
You also have Brown v. Board of Education.
And you had Brown v. Board of Education in '54, which overturned the one from the 1890s, which established separate but equal.
That's right.
So I mean, it happens.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, absolutely. So.
Well, you've got a number of issues I know on your plate. One of them big around here, and I don't mean to be jumping around, but is the opioids and heroin.
Yeah, so, that's a great one to bring
absolutely.
up.
So what all have you been doing? I know you've been working on leading the efforts there.
So yeah, our office has brought a major consumer lawsuit against one of the manufacturers of OxyContin. And before I really go into that, let me go ahead and frame the issue. We have an epidemic in this country. South Carolina is ranked 9th in the country in the number of prescriptions being prescribed. The number of babies born in the 13-year period has more than quadrupled. The number of babies born addicted to opiates has quadrupled in a 13-year period. There have been more than 3,000 opioid-related deaths since 2011. There were more opioid and heroin-related deaths between 2014 and 2016 than there were homicides. And in Horry County alone, there were more than 1,000 administrations of Narcan by law enforcement to people who were having an overdose reaction to an opiate. And that is borne by who? The taxpayer. So the epidemic is not only just destroying families and destroying lives, the cost is being borne by society as well as the taxpayer. Bringing a lawsuit against one company or any group of companies is not going to cure this. And again, this company manufactures a perfectly good drug that is used and administered by people who need it and prescribed by doctors who do it so lawfully. So we're not attacking the doctors, we're not attacking, except those that are run pill mills, obviously. But there are a lot of people out there that have chronic pain and acute pain, and it needs to be managed, and the doctors are prescribing it properly. But a lot of these doctors are relying on the representations made by opioid manufacturers for decades, and the manufacturers were marketing this drug in a way that led doctors to believe that it was not as addictive as it was. It would be like me giving you cocaine and saying, hey, cocaine's not addictive. And again, cocaine is illegal per se, opioids are not, but the way that they were marketing it was fraudulent. And so that's why we brought the lawsuit. We've also got to get into the schools and educate kids at all levels. Education is so important. We got to educate parents, the medical community, and I mean, again, we got to treat the symptom, treat the cause, not just the symptom. Right. But the lawsuit is just one tool in our bag of tools that we can use to address this epidemic, but it is not the only tool.
You know, I actually met with somebody last night. I might be throwing you a question out of left field, but one of the problems that he talked about was that 30-30s, the way they prescribe the opioids.
30-day prescription for, you burn your hand on the stove and you get a 30-day prescription of Vicodin or something. We only needed like maybe 2 pills. And
that's what he was saying. Is there a way to rate, or would it be legal to say you can only have a 7?
For people, and I believe there's a bill right now in the General Assembly. I haven't kept up with it, but I know that is one of the things that is being tracked, that doctors prescribing for acute pain. Now, we're not talking about someone dying of cancer or someone who has made a major issue and they need a 30-day. You don't want to have people with chronic, life-changing pain to have to come back every 5 to 7 days. Right. But somebody who sustains a sports injury and needs to get to the next 2 days or 3 or 5, those prescriptions need to be more narrowly tailored. What you end up having is you have someone who gets an injury, gets a 30-day prescription, uses it for 2 days, goes into the cabinet, and then Junior comes along with his friends and raids the cabinet for a pill popping party, and that spirals the epidemic.
Well, you're right. I mean, you mentioned cancer, and I put up with that with my wife, and of course she was on some intensely strong drugs at the end. And the one thing I worried about, if for some reason we beat this, which would have been a miracle, but they do occur occasionally, we might have another problem that's been caused by this.
Right.
Her addiction to painkillers, because I mean, she needed it to end the pain. But we're back already with the end of the second segment. We've got to go to our sponsors again, and we'll be back.
Surfside Cafe and Creamery, we pride ourselves on serving you the best there is. Our breakfast and lunch menus feature Boar's Head products. And how about starting your day with one of our signature coffee blends from Charleston Coffee Roasters? Surfside Cafe and Creamery has something for every taste, including the best ice cream on the Grand Strand. You gotta taste it to believe it. Surfside Cafe and Creamery, 1611 Highway 17, Surfside Beach.
My name is Angelo Antonucci, and I'd like to welcome you to my restaurant. I've been in Myrtle Beach now for over 30 years, and we are the home of the greatest steaks in the universe. Here at Angelo's, we have a fantastic Italian buffet with your favorite pastas served with meatballs and sausage and delicious gourmet pizzas. But where we really shine is our entrees like our Scampi Traditional, Alfredo or Lemon Romano served over linguine, our French pork chops with garlic mashed potatoes, and our twin fillets featuring our signature Marsala sauce. It's a great place to enjoy with family and friends, so stop by and see us at our new location at the corner of 24th Avenue South and South Kings Highway. Don't just take my word for it. Come in and try Angelo's, home of the greatest steaks in the universe.
Here at Angelo's.
Welcome back. We have Attorney General, Alan Wilson, and we're at the New China Buffet in Surfside Beach. And I'm here with Randall Wallace as my co-host. He's got a question for you.
Well, your office has taken up, human trafficking as a real issue, and that's been a big one here in Horry County, and dealing, I guess, with child predators, all that kind of stuff mixed in. What are y'all doing, and how y'all leading on it?
Well, in 2012, South Carolina was ranked one of the worst states in the country in how we enforce human trafficking laws, and that we had actually no human trafficking laws on the books. We have passed laws. We have enforced those laws. We created a human trafficking task force in 2012 that started off with 12 members. Now we're over 300 participating agencies and nonprofit groups supporting that task force. We have a real problem in this state. But if you go out globally, human trafficking is a $150 billion a year industry. There are over 40 million victims of human trafficking. And South Carolina is nestled between two of the top human trafficking hubs in the country, Charlotte and Atlanta. Horry County is one of the top 5 counties for human trafficking.
There might be a lot of people who don't really know exactly what it is and how it works. Can you explain what happened?
Modern day slavery, whether it's the sex slave or the labor trafficking arena. Rural areas, you find sex trafficking everywhere, but you also find a lot of labor trafficking. I tell people all the time, modern day slavery is alive and well. Last year we closed 59 human trafficking cases statewide. We currently have 72 human trafficking cases open on state court books right now. And again, Horry County is a haven for it. This community has it going on right now. The good news is that you've got a law enforcement who's up to this. They're tracking this. We're engaged with your local law enforcement, with your local solicitor's office. We're going after these thugs, and we're going after them with a vengeance. And I can't be prouder of the work that we've accomplished through our grand jury efforts.
Well, that's great, because there's nothing worse than one human being taking advantage of another for profit. That's baloney. Yeah. But it's been going on ever since there's been human beings on the earth, hasn't it? So. Well,
and I tell people, you think of human trafficking as a crime that happens on a Hollywood movie, but no, it happens here. I know it for a fact. It's happening as we speak.
Yeah, and in Myrtle Beach, the transient nature of our economy and everything, I'm sure, is a breeding ground for it.
Yeah, well, and you have you have a very robust tourism industry, which is a good thing. We want tourism here. We need tourism here. But with the good, sometimes comes the bad. And areas where there's high trafficking of tourists coming through, people from out of state, you get some of those shady elements that come with it.
And not only shady elements, but you get a lot of runaways too who are subject to getting caught up in it.
Oh, yeah.
To a place like this where you can get lost in crowds and not found.
1 in 7 runaways is a victim of human trafficking, and 86% of those that are victim of human trafficking come from foster homes or like a social services department. So it's rampant.
So how do you educate the kids not to get themselves mixed up in it?
Well, obviously our task force, one of the mandates of our task force is not just going after the thugs and the traffickers and the slave traders. It's actually going out and educating not just the kids, but the adults, law enforcement, the medical community, people, just activists, community folks, civic groups, the faith community. And so our task force is actually going out there and we're doing human trafficking awareness campaigns. In fact, I passed a billboard coming in here with a hotline So we are reaching out into the community. We are raising awareness. We're talking about it. And obviously, by talking about it, you're exposing it. And by exposing it, we're going to choke it out.
Good. Good. That's a positive. Yeah. Very positive. I guess we're getting down towards the end. We can't end a discussion about South Carolina politics and a state official without discussing some of the stuff that goes with ethics and what have you up in Columbia. And if you can go into, I know, of course, there's been the big things that Pasco has taken over from you, but however you see it evolving in Columbia.
Yeah, well, the Office of the Attorney General has been at the tip of the spear in fighting public corruption and enforcing public integrity laws, especially since I've been there. I was the first Attorney General to authorize a statewide grand jury investigation of a statewide elected official. We have indicted more than a dozen law enforcement officials, including 3 elected sheriffs, 1 here in the PD. A couple years back, we've indicted and prosecuted, rather, about half a dozen members of the General Assembly. We've prosecuted a Marion County superintendent. We've prosecuted a bunch of low country superintendents, a lot of local officials, judicial magistrates, folks in the Department of Transportation. I have a grand jury team that focuses on white collar public corruption. That's what they do. And these are career prosecutors who are just really good at their jobs. And of course, there's probably been no group of people in the history of South Carolina who've gotten more public corruption prosecution experience than the team that I've assembled in the Attorney General's office. And they're looking at it every day. And I'm really proud of the work that they've done. As we gear up to run for re-election, I'm always quick to remind people, there's only one person running in this race who has ever actually prosecuted a case and been in the courtroom in a criminal trial. And you're talking to him right now. I'm a career prosecutor. I'm a proven person. I'm proven in the court in fighting this type of stuff and defending our state's constitution, the U.S. Constitution, as well as enforcing public integrity laws. No one else can claim that. And so that's one of the reasons I'm running for re-election, is so that we can continue that record that we've demonstrated over the last 7 years.
Well, you are running for re-election, so what are your priorities other than that one? Just quickly.
Well, just since 2011, we've grown our Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force from 44 to over 100 law enforcement agencies. We've grown the Human Trafficking Task Force to over 300 groups. I want to double that. Obviously we're hip deep in this opioid stuff. I can't talk about a lot of it, but there's a lot of stuff that I want to do. Sure. As it relates to prosecution and enforcement of laws that people are violating as it relates to the opioid epidemic. The Attorney General's office is so big and it is so busy that I feel like that it needs someone who understands what the role of the AG is. And I am above everyone else in this race. I'm the one person who actually knows what they're doing. And I'm surrounding myself with a team of career prosecutors who know what they're doing. And I think that we can do even more in the next couple of years. And that's what I'd like the opportunity to continue doing. My wife and my kids would love for me to come home and get out of this job because it takes me on the road. I got an 8 and a 9-year-old. On the weekends, I'm a colonel in the National Guard, so I'm a 22-year veteran.
Oh, wow.
And so between National Guard, Attorney General, and being a daddy and a husband, my cup overrunneth.
Overfloweth,
yeah. So it's busy, but I love it. I truly get a tremendous amount of satisfaction serving. I love serving the public, and this is something that I feel called to do, and I look forward to continue doing.
Well, thank you very much for joining us today, making the trip out from Columbia to Surfside just for the filming. We appreciate that very much.
Thank you,
and we thank you for your time and your service.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
It's my first time in front of the camera.
You did great, man.
And that's all for us. We'll be back next week.